With Cowboys training camp truly minutes away from starting, they've made a roster move. A defensive end has joined the team. That is James Houston, who we did mention as a workout player the Cowboys had in before training camp got going. He now joins the club. We'll break down the corresponding roster move. But as a reminder, make sure you guys are subscribed. When news happens, when roster moves happen, we have you covered. We changed the entirety of the rest of the day for us here in the office to get this video out. So hit that sub button if you haven't already done so. Here were the roster moves that went down today, officially announced by the team as well. James Houston, probably best known for his time with the Lions, was signed. Luiji Vilain, the former UDFA edge rusher, released. So the Cowboys shuffling the bottom of the roster there as one guy comes in and one guy gets sent out. The Cowboys had worked out 4 players, by the way. It was Jesse Luketa, Cameron Klein, and James Houston. We did mention that on our video earlier on Monday. And then after that video had gone out, the NFL Transaction Wire revealed that William Bradley King of the Commanders, most notably a draft pick, was also among that 4-person workout, as the Cowboys clearly wanted to shuffle that back end of the edge rusher room. If you'd gone back and listened to our video or you watched at the time, I think I made something along the lines of a comment of like, if I were going to sign somebody, James Houston I thought was at least the most notable and probably the best one from a production standpoint. Of course, with these things, whoever performs the best ends up being the guy who gets added to the organization and gets a chance to play and showcase, what he's able to do. But Houston it's honestly a little sneaky. Like there is a scenario in which he does find his way onto the Cowboys roster. I think it's complicated because, as we'll get into, there's a lot of just sheer depth on this class that you have to kind of sort through and are in this room, and it's probably a little bit tough for him to find a way to pull it off, but it's possible. Now, be honest with me, folks. Had you heard of James Houston before this? Y for yes, N for no. I have. I just pulled up my 2022 NFL Draft Big Board. I had a 7th round grade on James Houston. I did 38 edge rushers that year from a scouting pre-draft perspective. Houston was 30th. Vilain was 33. So kind of funny how that one turns out there. We'll mention some more of the notes on that in a little bit. But had you heard of him? Go vote the pinned comment. Y for yes, N for no. In the end, this is predominantly some bottom-of-the-roster shuffling. But, with that said, I think this is good by the Cowboys. I think he is an upgrade over what the Cowboys had previously, and I've always been at least somewhat intrigued with James Houston. Now, look, if you can get better with what is the 91st player on your roster, in theory that's what they just did here, why not get better with it when it doesn't actually cost you anything at all? In theory, this helps the competition, right? Houston's going to get a bunch of playing time in the preseason. He's going to get a chance to showcase what he did earlier in his career as a member of the Lions, most notably, is still there. I think he's very interesting. The traits are good. The production was good. He's not very big. 6'1" is a generous listing. He was 6 foot and a quarter coming out of Jackson State. Very funny how I always look back and do these things. Like I go back and look at my notes of like, I don't remember what I wrote 3 years ago. How would I? 3.5 years ago. My player comp for James Houston was Jason Williams, the Cowboys legend, also a small school guy who I thought, didn't work out very well. He kind of was a tweener edge, and he's very much found a home in the NFL as a situational pass rusher. This is not someone you consistently want setting the edge, but when he's had chances, as we'll get into, from a situational edge perspective, he's been productive. So the goal is 218,000 subscribers here on today's here on the Cowboys Report. I think we're going to get that on today's show. If you haven't already, please hit that sub button and join us so you don't miss out on any and all Cowboys YouTube coverage. To Houston. The production most notably stood out in 2012, where he was an undrafted free agent with the Detroit Lions. Wasn't even on the active roster. Didn't join until like November, I think, of that year. And then had 2 sacks against the Bills, and then a sack in each of his next 3 games, and then he had 4-game sack streak to kind of begin his career. In 2023, placed on IR, suffered a leg injury, 2024, returns to the Lions, doesn't stick around, gets cut by Detroit. Browns end up getting him off of waivers, had just the one sack, one TFL, 8 tackles in the 2024 campaign. You're kind of hoping that this ends up being a little bit more of the guy we saw early in his career. And he went to Jackson State, but he originally began his career at Florida, and then he was involved in that, I think it was like 8 guys or something in the credit card fraud scheme that Florida was doing for some reason. So I think the potential as a situational passer, who, if we're being honest, probably makes the practice squad, does make this at least a little bit intriguing. Of note, the pressure rates the last couple years over Houston, just the total pressures. Again, the total pressures 17 doesn't really align with the sheer volume of sacks. It was kind of just like, he was abnormally efficient. But pressure rates are more consistent year over year. 18.5, I would almost toss out 2023 given the injury. 15.2 last year. 15% pressure rate's pretty solid. Like, that's actually very good relative to the rest of the NFL. I think this ends up being a guy that maybe gets the occasional Sam linebacker rep, but I kind of doubt it from that perspective. I think this is more of a practice squad piece, but there is some upside, given that some of you probably heard of him, with how good he was early in his career with the Detroit Lions. So will James Houston make the Cowboys roster this season? Let me know in the comments section. 1 for yes, 0 for no. Get those predictions in right now. I am, again, intrigued by the signing. I like the bottom of the roster shuffling. I have a tough time finding a roster spot for him. I might find room for him on my next practice squad projection. He might be a better fit than Tyrus Wheat in that mold. But Micah's going to make it. Dante Fowler's going to make it. Ezieruaku's going to make it. Nealon's going to make it. I would assume Sam Williams, Peyton Turner, barring trades or injuries, make it. That's already 6 edges. I can't fit room for a 7th. So practice squad, I think, is probably a better expectation for Houston. One more note. This does not satisfy my need for corner. This does not satisfy my need for defensive tackle, or if you want a running back or whatever. Treat this move as a move in a bubble. It doesn't preclude the Cowboys from doing anything else. They wanted to shuffle out the back end of the edge room. They did it. I'm not going to give it a lower grade or anything because, but it's not a DT. I can still go get a DT. Nothing about this precludes me from doing anything else in that regard. So we'll see if he does anything. I think he's going to be a good player to watch in the preseason. But right as camp gets going, the Cowboys have made another roster move.